Nice Radio Callaloo presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Nice Radio. First aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info. But remember, we are also on YouTube and Facebook. I am, of course, Keith Joseph. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It's the 30th day of January 2021. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. The biggest social media story for this week is clearly the tiff in Parliament between the leader of the opposition, Godwin Friday, and the leader of government, Ralph Gonsalves. And already, young people have taken it and done a remix. And it appears that for the first time, Vincentians got to see another side of Godwin Friday. For the first time, since he's become leader of the opposition and since he's been in politics, Vincentians got to see that particular side of Godwin Friday. Because Godwin Friday stood his ground and did not allow himself to be bullied by Ralph Gonsalves. Over the years of his leadership of government, there have been many who have had their own ideas about the way in which Gonsalves operates within Parliament. And there are many who believe that there are times, and there have been times, that he may have been able to have his way because perhaps the Speaker of the House may have been a little timid, or because the other side just decided to allow him to have his way. You may recall there were times when, while he was Speaker of the House, Jomo Thomas may have had cause to step in and to call a spade a spade. But clearly, during this particular parliamentary session, Friday was not going to allow himself to be cowed into submission by the dictates of Papa. And so when Papa attempted to dictate, Friday opted to respond. He responded in kind. And he reached one point where essentially he had to say to the Prime Minister, sit down. Because I am not sitting down, essentially. And the question of, you think you're a bad man? Sit down. It must have shocked Gonzalez because he was looking across the table at someone of a similar coloration, a fair-skinned person like himself. He was not looking at an Adam Eustace or a Daniel Cummins or a Sinclair Leacock. And so it must have been a shock to him that someone like him, looking like him on the other side, would stand up toe to toe, mano a mano, and say, sit down. And essentially he's saying, this is not a chance for you to show any bravado inside here, boss. This is the people's house. It is the people's business we are about. This is not your house somewhere out countryside. If you want to talk to people as you feel like and to dictate, go over there. Go boss. But not inside here in the parliament. And so Gonzalez have gotten the shock of his life. Because the leader of the opposition showed the spunk that many in this country may have thought he did not have. The capacity to stand his ground against Gonzalez and to virtually overpower Gonzalez in the People's Parliament, leaving the entire government side askance, surprised, and in a sense, debilitated. But you're likely to see more of that, because those who follow Parliament have often had to ask themselves, is the House Gonzalez's house? And is he the only lawyer in Parliament who understands how the parliamentary system is supposed to operate? So it's a warning shot for Gonzalez that in this first round he lost. He was defeated. He was humiliated. And the social media remix adds to that humiliation. Because if there's one thing Gonzalez cannot take, it's young people laughing after him. And so that social media piece will resonate among the youth of this country. That in the parliament, the people's house, the leader of the opposition not only just stood his ground, but backed back across the room, shocking the members and letting them understand this is not going to be tolerated. We're not in your house. We're in the people's house doing the people's business, and you don't have a monopoly on how we do the people's business. You don't have a monopoly on who should speak when and for how long. that is to be dictated by the Speaker of the House. But also, it sends a very clear message that henceforth, Gonzalez is not likely to take that chance again. Because he knows now that, as happened with Eustace, when Eustace stood his ground and said absolutely nothing and they brought the police to move them, that he knows for sure that the leader on the other side will stand his ground and respond in a manner befitting the requirements of the Honorable House. He knows now another side to Godwin Friday. A side that he has never seen before, but a side that he will never forget. The politics have changed. And for the New Democratic Party and its adherents, its followers, they must feel emboldened. Because some of them may have been a little bit bothered by the seeming quiescence of Godwin Friday, by his easygoing manner. But they have found out that like Eustace before him, who also very easygoing, the right time, the right moment, he will explode. And just another look is of the view that Gonzalez will never forget what transpired in that tiff between him and Friday. He recognized that he can't just stay on one side and point and dictate, and that everybody will keel over because they're on his plantation. The leader of the opposition has signaled that he is not on your plantation and he's not in your house, nor will he allow himself and his entire party in Parliament to do anything otherwise but to stand their ground and to let the ruling regime know we are also here as part of government, because this is the legislative arm of government and we are here to do the people's business. So the social media has already gone viral with what happened and with the remix. And it is going to be something that will haunt Ralph Gonzalez for the rest of his political career. He understands more clearly now that the political gamesmanship is not something that he alone can control. And that the tenure that he has just started will be replete with instances like these, where he will not be allowed to do as he pleases in the people's house, where the people's business is concerned. Many others on both sides of the political spectrum would have been surprised because they've not seen that side to Godwin Friday. They've seen it now. And that will add to their evaluation of him as a politician and as a leader. But you know, in addition to that latest incident, Just Another Look has always insisted that Gonzalez is very thin-skinned. And we have not been surprised because we have explained on this program that the seeming eagerness for Gonzalez to file suit against this one and that one and that one may well be unprecedented in the politics of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And no one has been impressed by him seeming to suggest, well, the cost will be given to this charity or to that charity or what have you, what have you. No one has been impressed with that. But many have been bothered by the fact that a prime minister could be so thin-skinned as to seek to have legal action taken against others who have said this and who have said that. And at the same time, be able to say some things of his own that left many bothered. Many bothered. That's why so many can empathize with the Sinclair Leacock stance of insistence that we are not on anybody's plantation, and certainly not yours. Not yours. So don't try to speak to us or treat us as though we are on your plantation. But Kenton Chance has shown an understanding of journalistic integrity and the fearlessness that comes with that. So he's not afraid to defend his journalistic integrity. He's not afraid to stand up and say, this is my understanding of my profession, and I will do it as long as I have the strength and the will. We've seen that in Shelley Clark. Standing up. Making it known that this is not your newspaper. And you've seen Shelley Clark chastise one individual in particular who apparently used to be taking time to try to send in multiple emails, multiple letters to the editor. It took a while for him to recognize they were all of a similar nature, although they were coming from different email addresses. But they were all essentially of a particular type. And he dealt with it. So Kenton Chance, much like Shelley Clark, is willing to stand on journalistic principle and journalistic integrity rather than cave in. Rather than cave in. You see, Vincentians are finally waking up to what Just Another Look wishes to call the political culture of Ralph Gonsalves. The political culture of Ralph Gonsalves. Vincentians may only now be beginning to understand that perhaps, just perhaps, Gonsalves may well have felt himself infallible. There's always an explanation. There's always a doctoral spin. And if we follow Gonsalves' line of reasoning, then we may be correct in assuming that he may have been well aware of what he was doing when he labeled people minority wrongs, possessive of a sort of learner's helplessness, lowest common denominator. malignant and dishonest, etc., etc. It may not have been by accident that those terms became part of his political repertoire. And that they were used and uttered with a level of confidence. But they're all demeaning and despicable terms. And one has to look at the contexts in which he used them and to whom he was referring in each instance to get an understanding of his political culture. It also means that we should all be anxious for him to have a day or two in court where he can be made to respond to experienced, unbiased lawyers on some of the accusations that have been made about him. Perhaps we should have had a day in court in respect of the Michel Andrews case. Or perhaps we should have a fulsome discussion on the Margaret Parsons case. Many have asked how Colin Williams came to be called by some Mr. Nolly Pross. Mr. Nolly Pross. But the law gave him that right, and he used it. But we may ask, how many Vincentians accused of rape have had their matters nolly prossed in this country? How many? Indeed, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines' legal history, how many cases have been nolly prossed? But look around you and look at the lawyers that we have in this society. And one of the features appears to be their seeming ability to convince all but themselves that they are somehow smarter than everyone else. And this is probably the reason why so many of them tend to gravitate towards politics. It may well be that they believe that their sense of reasoning and logic allows them to sell themselves as being smarter and brighter than everybody else. And why so many once in politics believe that they can tell you just about anything they want and justify it because they know the law. And let me serve notice here, and let me warn you here, and let me this there, etc., etc. Common practices among those lawyers who have become politicians. That is not unique to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So we have to have an understanding of what happens in our society. Interestingly too, when lawyers become politicians and the whole office in government, there appears to be a tendency to what some may interpret as quote-unquote veiled threats. And an apparent legal self-righteousness. Because you didn't do law, they're bright. And one may recall the matter we always address on Just Another Look. And that is the Prime Minister's use of critical Parliament's time in January 2011, when he delivered the lengthy political diatribe about somebody or some plot to assassinate him. The story, or should we call it a fable, much like Aesop's fables, was told by none other than the experienced lawyer of several years standing, the Prime Minister himself. And on and on and on and on and on he went. But the matter of credibility of what he was saying hung over his presentation. And as far as we are aware, we know of no case that emerged from that fable that led to anyone being hauled before the nation's courts based on what he was saying as apparent evidence in the Parliament. But he took up the parliamentary time because he's the Prime Minister. He's the head of government business. But just as happened in the recent tiff between Friday and Gonzalez, just another look says very clearly, without fear of contradiction, that Gonzalez must understand that over the years, the Vincentian people have come to full recognition of exactly who he is, exactly what he stands for, in spite of what he says. Exactly who he is, exactly what he stands for, in spite of what he says. You see, the average Vincentian today has come to an understanding that it is often difficult to discern fact from fiction when politicians speak. And some of them don't remember what they said, even though their photographic memory often allows them to remember a lot of things. But they need to remember what they say. The current laughable issue in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is the government's insistence on the use of the term cluster to refer to the growing number of COVID-19 cases as opposed to using the term community spread. So we are fighting about semantics. We're fighting about semantics because there's a precise definition of cluster versus community spread. Well, here it is. The average Vincentian has absolutely no interest in the government's quibbling about us having clusters as opposed to community spread. You all could argue that among yourself as long as all you want. The average Vincentian couldn't care less. What the average Vincentian is bothered about is that plenty people getting COVID in the country. And it's happening in communities throughout the country. So you could stay there as a Ministry of Health, as a Prime Minister, as a government, and NEMO, and argue from now till doomsday as to whether we have clusters or we have community spread. The fact of the matter is that COVID-19 is spreading throughout the country, by your own admission and by your own words. That's what the Chief Medical Officer said. It is throughout the country. That is what epidemiologist Tamara Bob essentially said. And we will get to that in a moment. So why are you seeking to quibble over something that is inconsequential as far as the health and well-being of the average Vincentian is concerned? Oh, we don't have a community spread. The World Health Organization wrong to categorize us that we only have clusters. The numbers that are increasing has left the country bothered. And you quibbling over whether we have cluster or community spread. It does not make a difference to the average Vincentian. The average Vincentian wants to know that the reality on the ground is that we are increasing in numbers, seemingly without control, and that information appears to be coming to hand of what we had already said was irresponsibility on the part of those in charge. To the average Vincentian, when the chief medical officer admits that COVID is throughout and distant and means, that is being interpreted as COVID being in communities throughout the country. You stay there and argue whether it's a cluster or community spread. The average Vincentian is concerned about that. The way the government is behaving, instead of explaining to the nation why we are getting the kind of stories and as we've recently gotten from an assistant commissioner of police with regard to his own family, instead of them being concerned about that, them quibbling about whether we have cluster or community spread. As the old people say, as Rome burns, our politicians are quibbling over terms, over definitions of terms, as Rome burns. The average Vincentian is aware of the significant increase in numbers of COVID cases in this country. The average Vincentian is aware that what we are being told by those responsible for overseeing the response to the COVID-19 pandemic may not be satisfactory anymore, because they are not able to explain in a satisfactory way why the numbers are increasing the way they have. See, Gonzalez, in his own style, attempt to offer, there are a number of factors, the this, the that, they're not operating singly. We can't blame any single one of them. You're correct. We can't blame any single one of them, but we also can't blame you alone. We blame your whole government as being highly irresponsible in the way you have addressed this matter. The whole government. So you have to factor in addition to the 9 morning business, in addition to the fact that people were breaking quarantine, to the fact that people have been having parties and not wearing masks, etc. Add to that the irresponsibility of your government, of you and your government in dealing with this matter. Add that as perhaps one of the most critical factors. That's why there's an issue of credibility when you and others responsible for overseeing the crisis, when you all speak, the matter of credibility hangs over your head. The matter of credibility extends to those who are giving the population updates on the pandemic's impact in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Because Vincentians are uncertain of what they should believe. God, more recently, we heard you talking about some things as being fake news. You're becoming more and more like Trump every day, comrade. You're talking about fake news in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Is what the Assistant Commissioner Richard Brown saying? Is that fake news? Will you label that fake news? Or are you upset that he brought it out? Or perhaps you're happy? Vincentians are uncertain of what they should believe. The credibility of the spokespersons, the credibility of the leadership of government appear to have long since worn thin during the course of this pandemic. Vincentians are today challenging the number of deaths actually caused by COVID-19 in St. Vincent and Grenadines. They don't want to believe what you're telling them about the deaths. They don't want to believe it. That's how bad the credibility issue is for the government and for those in charge of the project. People no longer sufficiently trust you. Because when others have been coming out and saying that they have not been followed through, we go back to the first case, remember? Remember that first case? Remember when that lady wrote her own letter to Eyewitness News because she felt it necessary to tell her story of what she went through. She trying to ensure that she was not sufficient, she was not sick. Trying to ensure that she's taken care of. And the seemingly nonchalant responses that she got, or failure to respond appropriately, compelled her to write her story so that the entire Vincentian public could know. That was early days in the pandemic. Early days. Was that fake news? How have we addressed the situation and arrested it such that people could feel confident and have confidence in what you are telling them that you are doing? But people have continued to tell their stories. They've taken to social media, they have taken to radio calling programs because they recognize that their stories are not really being taken seriously enough. So when some government official, be it the Prime Minister and anybody else, dares to talk about fake news, then there's a confidence problem. The people for whom the issues have been real, the experiences have been real, they lose confidence. And their families lose confidence. And their friends lose confidence. When you label them as fake news. But now, you have somebody who's supposed to be credible, an Assistant Commissioner of Police, somebody who is always on social media and whose political coloration appears very clear, now coming out and telling his own story. Nobody dare say it's fake news now, right? Nobody. The surge in the number of people wearing masks on a daily basis in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not in response to anything the COVID-19 task force tell them. Because you've been telling them that since March last year and they ain't bothered with you. It is because of their own perception and understanding of the number of people they hear getting the thing. Not really in response to you. It was in response to you that they take you seriously since you started. It's not in response to you. It is response to what you may well have been saying was fake news. They know of somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who got it. That's why they're taking it on. Vincentians have started wearing masks en masse because of the numbers who have gotten it. That is how bad the situation of credibility is. Because they recognize that the Ministry of Health have long since dropped the ball. Since Little Boy Blue was Minister of Health, Luke Brown, they dropped the ball. I will address Jimmy Prince's dropping of the ball or continuing of the process. We'll discuss that a little later in the program. But don't be so anxious to tell people that it's fake news, because they know it is a matter of life and death. The increased use of mask wearing in the country is the average Vincentian's response to what they are hearing and seeing for themselves around the country, and their dissatisfaction with both the messengers and the message. They're dissatisfied. They're dissatisfied. There is a credibility gap. No one has been able to offer the Vincentian public a satisfactory explanation as to why, for example, the leadership of the Ministry of Health had to quarantine Minister Jimmy Prince, CMO Kizza Beach, and Permanent Secretary Knights, all at the same time. We were told, quote unquote, out of an abundance of caution. Out of an abundance of caution. But did the public get to know exactly what caused them to have had an abundance of caution? No one is able to explain to the Vincentian public, or has explained to the Vincentian public, how so many senior police personnel had to be quarantined. Some out of an abundance of caution. Vincentians are searching for truth. They have difficulty getting truth from politicians under normal circumstances. And that perception of a credibility gap extends to the COVID-19 situation. There is a credibility issue over the timing between the 16th of November, when we first had the rumblings of Soufriere, and the 29th of December, when eventually they had to tell people. That kind of credibility issue only adds to the concerns of the average Vincentian. Why should they trust you? Why should they trust you? You had to wait until the 29th of December, when people start talking about the things for themselves because they went up to see what was happening on Soufriere, only to have it known after the fact that your first signal was on the 16th of November. Nobody in St. Vincent and the Grenadines thought it was important enough to inform the nation. The 8 rumblings that we had on the 23rd of December was not enough for anybody in authority to alert the Vincentian public that something was going wrong. What? We thought Christmas was too close? When on the 27th of December, NASA informs the regional authorities, seismic authorities, about the hotspot that they are seeing in the Soufriere crater, we still took another 2 days before we sent a team to observe. And then, because people that very morning had started circulating in the social media what they were seeing coming out of Soufriere, only then, later on the 29th, we have a press conference. There has to be an issue of credibility and a challenge in respect of the level of responsibility shown by those who lead us. Because apparently you didn't trust the Vincentians enough to be able to tell them what transpired on the 16th of November, nor did you trust them enough to tell them what happened on the 23rd of December. To tell them what NASA say they see on the 27th of December. But on the 29th, when social media starts showing what was happening, then the governments come, call the press conference. And that's why we say that you may well have been hiding behind the seismic authorities, because you should have been telling the Vincentian public that a long time ago. But when the people come, you're asking more questions than the media. Suddenly you're more concerned than everybody else, ignoring the fact that you allowed things to slip away. Did you or did you not know of the incidents with regard to of the events at Soufriere on the 16th of November? Did you or did you not know, as Prime Minister of this country, ahead of everything, about the 8 rumblings on the 23rd of December? Did you or did you not know of the NASA pronouncement on the 27th of December? Come on. So people are not dismissing what they perceive to have been a credibility issue with regard to the volcano from what they're seeing with regard to dengue, what they're seeing with regard to COVID-19. They're putting it all together. They're not dealing with any singly anymore. They're looking at the global level of responsibility or lack thereof shown by the leadership of this country. That is the problem. Yes, we are told, that since in January 2019, the region was warned about a potential outbreak of dengue. And we told people that. And we told people that. That's it, right? We tell you so, that's it. Just like we tell you about COVID, and that's it. But you're quibbling now over whether you have community spread or cluster, because you're worried about how it will be interpreted. People worried about their health. You could worry about definitions and quibble over that. People in this country are searching for truth. Plain, unadulterated truth. Just tell them the truth. They are searching for answers. And they are pondering whether it is a case like Trump, where the messages and the messengers are more influenced by political dynamics rather than by primary concern for the health and well-being of all of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The important question for us today in this program is whether the political dynamics are hindering access to truth, pure, unadulterated, with regard to COVID-19. You see, on the morning of Thursday, January 28th, 2021, the international networks showed St. Vincent and the Grenadines at that time with a total of 827 overall cases of COVID-19. Up until the beginning of December, we were just above 100. About 111 or somewhere there. So in between December 28th and where we are today, the 30th of January 2021, a matter of 31 days. 31 days. This is where we are. Over 800 cases. We've added nearly 700 cases in that shorter period. You've been hearing the numbers. One day it is 60 plus, one day it is 50 something, next day is 40 something, 30 something, 20 something per day. Eyewitness News edition dated 27 January 2021 quoted rather extensively from Tamara Bob, epidemiologist at the Ministry of Health. But an interesting part of what they quoted her saying was this, quote, also note that cases are present in all health districts. We repeat that. Also, note that cases are present in all health districts. End of quote. We want to worry about cluster versus community spread. Cases are present in all health districts of this country. And we're telling you that Bob's comments are consistent with what Chief Medical Officer Kizza Beach said about COVID-19 some time ago, when she says it was throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Throughout. We made reference then to the CMO's comments. We did it in our program first aired on Saturday the 23rd of January 2021 to signal the seriousness of our situation. But Eyewitness News dated 27 January 2021 quotes Bob, who was telling us about the age grouping and the statistics. So 47% of the local cases are female, 35% are males. But the ministry cannot identify the genders of the remaining 18%. We wouldn't ask for an explanation of that. We wouldn't ask for an explanation. Because we're not quite sure why you could make a statement that you can't identify the genders of the remaining 18% who have tested positive. Because one would imagine that if you're testing, you're keeping records. But for what it's worth, this is what it says in Eyewitness News. 47% of the local cases are female, 35% are males, and the ministry cannot identify the genders of the remaining 18%. Most persons who have been infected are between the ages of 25 to 44. Which is 37.5% of all cases with no recent travel history. And she says, notable also is the 15 to 24-year-old age group, which has about 12.9% of cases. And the 45 to 54-year-old age group, which has around 11.9% of the cases. Right? And then Bob says, cases have been recorded in all age groups. All age groups. Over 50%. The Calico, Pembroke, Georgetown Health Districts. Over 50% of the cases. And the Calico, Pembroke, and Georgetown Health Districts. And Eyewitness News then tells you the Calico Health District runs from Arnesville to Stubbs. They have the most cases, 20.1%. Pembroke Health District from Camden Park to Barralee, 19% of the cases. The Georgetown Health District, Georgetown to Fancy, 16% of the cases. You know, friends, right? You know, dear listeners, how long we've been saying you needed to identify the places. Yes, you keep people's names, but you needed to identify the cases. Now we're doing that. We said this last week. Now we are doing it. Now, after things have reached a critical stage, we suddenly get sense, good sense. Because clearly, if people know where the hotspots are, they are better prepared. But if you keep it secret, what have you done? You have denied people the opportunity to exercise greater caution. But we are saying here on Just Another Look today, lest we become complacent, it is particularly important for us to heed the words of Tamara Bob. Also, note that cases are present in all health districts, so precautions should be taken wherever you go. Now we're being told that. Take the precautions wherever you go, because it's everywhere. Just Another Look is saying St. Vincent and the Grenadines is in dire straits. But remember, you can't panic unless they give you the order to panic. And then, of course, there's the Minister of Health, Jimmy Prince. Jimmy Prince is quoted on Eyewitness News dated January 28, 2021. Quote, there are clusters associated with ministerial departments, churches, parties, private sector workplaces, and families. Many of these clusters have linkages. This categorization is the one assigned to St. Vincent and the Grenadines by the Pan American Health Organization in the COVID-19 Situation Update 115 issued on the 22nd of January. Of course, we've gone into the quibbling over cluster versus community spread. A waste of time, people. A waste of time. Eyewitness News says Prince said that his ministry's epidemiology unit will continuously review the transmission patients to determine what category best describes the disease in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as this categorization contributes to the various strategic interventions implemented in the battle against COVID-19 and SVG. Well, people, listen to it. This is a whole lot of rubbish. Whether it is a cluster or community spread, the fact of the matter is that it's all over the country. Stop trying to be nice and to be fanciful and to be politically correct. And get to work. Because what is happening is that you have people telling you, well, whatever interventions you're planning to prepare for or what have you, what you have now, whether it's a cluster or community spread, is not being handled appropriately. Read the letter, read the article about the Assistant Commissioner of Police, Richard Brown, and his family. That's what people are telling you. You there trying to be politically correct. To please whom? To please whom? You worried about whether we are categorized as having community spread as opposed to clusters. When people in St. Vincent and Grenadines telling you, well, whatever you want to use, the fact of the matter is that some people not even being followed up with. Just another look says, so like his government peers, Prince is squibbling about terminology. And this line of thinking fits in nicely with Godwin Fries' phrasing. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it is a duck. Whatever else one may wish to call it, it is a duck. One of the things about government officials, including ministers, is of course their inability and sometimes unwillingness to address reality directly. We ought not to be surprised then when Prince is insistent that the government did not drop the ball. The government did not drop the ball. Well, where does Jimmy Prince live? It can't be in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. If Jimmy Prince is saying the government did not drop the ball, then Jimmy Prince needs to perhaps be evaluated. Perhaps it is that Prince does not quite understand the meaning in practical terms of the phrase to drop the ball on something. He may have inadvertently caught up a little bit too much in perhaps reading one of the books that Gonzalez gave him when years ago he agreed to run and he was introduced along with others in the rally at the Calico playing field. Maybe he's been swayed by what he read. But for Prince's enlightenment, let's say according to the dictionaries, to drop the ball, sir, means to fail to do something one should have done. To fail to do something one should have done, or to make a mistake of some sort. Sir, that's the simple definition of dropping the ball. And if we were to follow the sequencing of the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is difficult even for you, sir, not to conclude that it reflects not just a dropping of the ball, but a level of irresponsibility regarding governance in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Sir, you see, follow the logic. This is Prince, and we quote, "Rather, the extensive measures implemented succeeded in preventing the rise in cases of COVID-19 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines for 10 months, which was seen in every neighboring country throughout 2020. Right? We didn't have the kind of rises that they had. Fine. He goes on. Between March 11th and December 26, 2020, this country recorded 110 cases. Even as neighboring countries such as St. Lucia, Grenada, Trinidad, Martinique, and Barbados were experiencing scores of cases for months. Right? So we were doing better than everybody else. Okay? He goes on. This is Prince. The government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines through a NEMO coordinated response led by the Health Services Subcommittee, working closely with the Ministry of National Security, implemented continuously and adapted measures in keeping with the constantly changing knowledge and epidemiology of the COVID-19 pandemic and local events and situations. Close attention was paid to measures implemented in other nations, their successes and their failures, emerging knowledge about the virus and measures suitable to the context of the multi-island state that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is, and these were developed. End of quote. So here is just another look. Okay. Jimmy Prince seems to be going good so far in his presentation. But then he switches to a kind of Ralph Gonzalez type moment. Here it goes. Quote, the multi-pronged strategy included reducing the risk of the introduction of the virus into St. Vincent and the Grenadines while strengthening the country's capacity to detect, test, treat, and contain the virus. Poor compliance with existing protocols while persons are outside the mandatory quarantine hotels is without doubt a problem. This is not unique to St. Vincent and the Grenadines and is found in countries even with draconian measures. End of quote. Now, you see, here's the political correctness, right? Just the other day, Ralph outlined a host of things that he says, not singly but collectively, responsible for what is happening now. Not a single thing, but many things all together. But he didn't include the government's irresponsible approach. We did. And we just did it again. But when Prince says, poor compliance with existing protocols while persons are outside the mandatory quarantine hotels is without doubt a problem. That's it? That's the problem? How were Prince and his chief medical officer and his permanent secretary, how did they get exposed? Were they victims of poor compliance with existing protocols while persons are outside the mandatory quarantine hotels? No blame is apportioned by Prince, just like Gonzalez, to allowing flight from infected Miami much too early. No blame for that. No blame for the election gatherings. Of course not. Of course not. No blame for the celebrations after the elections. Of course not. Not at all. Right? But now, some are saying, well, perhaps the flights that came in for Christmas, perhaps the cries at 9 mornings, perhaps. But Jimmy Prince seemed to have forgotten the sudden, almost inexplicable announcement by his own government on the afternoon of 31st December 2020, which declared something of an edict cancelling all scheduled entertainment for All Year's Night. That's how much they're planning. That a few hours before the All Year's Night celebrations, they cancelled it rather suddenly. A few hours before the All Year's Night celebrations. Countries that plan, Mr. Prince, countries that plan, announced that they were cancelling that long before. Long before. Indeed, in Barbados, Mia Mottley announced that she was cancelling it and agreed to compensate some people for who had planned the activities well in advance. Recompense them except for the alcohol. That was planning, sir. That's how planning is done. You know in advance the activities you're going to do, not wait suddenly and drop it on people because you appear to be ashamed that the numbers just climbing. Importantly, Just Another Look wishes to remind Minister Prince of the following. We said in an earlier edition of Just Another Look, quote, "The decision by Senior Magistrate Ricky Burnett to rule a no-submission case by the government representatives in the case against Jayandra Jackson on Tuesday, 5th January 2021. Noted, in handing down his ruling, the magistrate pointed out that with every case that comes before the court, the law and rules of evidence remain the same. So it cannot be that because COVID-19 is a pandemic, that somehow the court should adjust to respond to the pandemic. Now, the court recognizes that COVID-19 is a relatively new virus. But if you're going to prosecute persons for breaching an order, you have to realize that you must satisfy a court, not the Ministry of Health. If you are going to prosecute persons for breaching an order, you have to realize that you must satisfy a court, not the Ministry of Health. So Jimmy didn't know this. You're saying that you had so many things in place that you couldn't even prosecute somebody for breaching quarantine. That's how organized the government was. And of course, embarrassed the government, say they will appeal. Well, we'll see when they will appeal. Yeah. And Just Another Look commented then, the decision is a serious blow to the ruling regime, but it more importantly highlights some of the loopholes in the way in which we have done things since and under COVID-19. So when Jimmy Prince wants to suggest that they've been doing pretty well, he also is not admitting that they've messed up, even with regard to the making of a case for somebody breaching quarantine. You put the law, but you forget to do it properly so that you can't even win the case. So what is the measure you're talking about, Jimmy? What the people talking about dropping the ball is about what obtains now, Jimmy. You were doing pretty well up until, like you say, up until December. What happened after that, Jimmy? You dropped the ball. You, the ministry, and the entire government dropped the ball. That is the point that people are making. And if you can't see that, something is wrong with you. Minister Prince does not seem to recall that the aforementioned case, where the government's case against someone who broke quarantine, was acquitted on a no-case submission. So who then dropped the ball, Minister Prince? Who did? The government was seeking to prosecute someone using breach of quarantine regulation only to lose the case. But we ought not to be surprised. The ULP administration's line of march appears to be determined by Gonzales the Elder. The others merely fall in line, with the sole exception from time to time, perhaps, of Julian Francis. Few people in this country have taken Jimmy Prince seriously with his comment that the government did not drop the ball. It makes absolutely no sense. Just Another Look is of the view that as more Vincentians take to social media and to call-in programs in this country, the health officials are being pressured to engage themselves in higher levels of disclosure. That is why they're certainly telling us now it all over the country. Vincentians are tired of waiting for the kind of news they want to hear. And so they are sharing what news they have, what they gather from one another. And while this may not be the best possible scenario to have in the face of a pandemic, it is nonetheless what is happening. And the government's irresponsibility has to be blamed for it. Understand that, Jimmy. It is you all who have dropped the ball. In this country today, it is a fact that people are well ahead of the government and the health officials in respect of what is taking place in the country vis-a-vis the pandemic, just as they are in respect of Mama Sufre. Vincentians are comparing the Gonzalez government and the response to the pandemic with that of Donald Trump while he was in the White House. Nobody is at this stage impressed with the world boss. At present, many do not see him as a general, far less one with 5 stars. And Vincentians may do well to compare Gonzalez's response to the significant increase in the number of COVID-19 cases since December 2020 with that of his counterpart in Barbados, Mia Mottley. Mottley was the one to close down Barbados for 2 days. Gonzalez merely followed suit. And according to Nation News dated 27 January 2021, Mottley announced the previous day Barbados would take a national pause from the 3rd of February to the 17th to allow health workers time to fight the spread of COVID virus, which is now in the stage of community spread. And she put curfew on time. She put closing times on buildings. Yeah? Vincentians should take note of the fact that Mottley has instructed house-to-house testing during the declared national pause. House-to-house testing during the national pause. That is to get a grip on the true state of affairs across the country relative to the pandemic. The big question is whether Gonzalez will find himself being forced to adopt a similar strategy, since he appears to have long since run out of ideas. Long since run out of ideas. Long time. Comrade, there is nothing wrong with being a mimic. There's nothing wrong with follow fashion. Gonzalez is yet to admit publicly that it was an error of judgment on the part of his government to have restarted American Airlines flights from Miami when it did in the first instance some months ago. And since he does not do this, neither will his Minister of Health, Jimmy Prince, nor the Chief Medical Officer, nor the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health. At the time that we restarted it, Miami was a hotspot for COVID-19. Gonzalez may not be willing to declare that the decision to close some of our ports of entry came far too late. Similarly, we do not expect Gonzalez to say that he's following Mia Mottley in terms of her approach to managing the situation in Barbados. The problem in this country is that since taking office in 2001, Gonzalez appears to have allowed himself to become the sole go-to person in government. Perhaps that's the way he always wanted it to be. Everything begins and ends with him. The seemingly hubristic approach to governance, if one may dare use the term in respect of Gonzalez's leadership of this country, may have fashioned a political culture in which everyone has been made to look to Gonzalez for just about everything. But it is this emergent political culture that may have led us to the current situation, where to look to Gonzalez yields nothing but old talk, yields nothing but boring press huggings, a sort of demented political demagoguery. Vincentians, clearly scared by the growing number of COVID-19 cases being released every day, are no longer trustful, are no longer confident of anything that Gonzalez and his minions say about it. People are doing their own thing. And not so long ago, Mia Mottley announcing that she was among 5 Barbadians, 2 health officials and 3 cabinet members who received one of the COVID vaccines, the first dose. A CMC article is quoted, quote, "The Prime Minister said Barbados expects to receive vaccine doses through the COVID-19 Vaccines Global Access Facility, COVAX, which has been organized by the World Health Organization, to make available 2 billion doses of safe and effective inoculation by the end of this year." Yep. And then she says, but even without that, they have indicated to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Health that we may get an emergency amount for our frontline workers and for the most vulnerable by the end of January, early February, that will allow us to be able to start bringing down the temperature in the country. That's Barbados. You tell us about it, Vincent. During the past week, we also heard of Mia Mottley's approach to the government of India by letter sent to that country's Prime Minister. She wrote that, we quote, "I am urgently soliciting the assistance of your government to have access to 200,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine being manufactured in your country. We would appreciate your kind consideration of half of the supply, and if necessary, we would be willing to purchase the other 100,000 doses should it meet your favorable consideration." End of quote. She noted that the situation in her country has been exceptionally challenging, as it has been affected by 2 waves of the virus. Except Vincent Grenadines, we don't seem to be anxious to talk about waves. Some time ago, we were told we were supposed to try to get some vaccine, about 20,000, that should be here either March or April. But are we really in the know as to what is being done with regard to accessing vaccines? Or is Gonzalez waiting to follow Mia Mottley's footsteps yet again? Follow fashion. You see, some people are pulled down when they speak. But on the 24th of January, last Sunday, Eyewitness News carried a story captioned, "Senior Cop Peeved at COVID Testing Delay." The police officer in question is Assistant Commissioner of Police Richard Brown. And in his Facebook post on 23rd January, he complained about a lack of follow-up testing of his family 15 days after they tested positive for COVID-19. The article says Richard Brown in the social media post said that his family was told that health authorities would visit them for retesting. But Brown said that his family was yet to receive a visit despite his numerous calls to the COVID-19 hotline. So we asking Gonzalez, is this the kind of fake news you're talking about? We're asking Jimmy Prince, does this look like you have the ball in your hand? or it dropped? What is it? Do you think Richard Brown is making this up? Do you think he's making this up? Yeah? Brown wrote on his Facebook page, having called the hotline on numerous occasions seeking advice, they were told someone would visit to do a retest. They must remain home in quarantine. Well, they are still waiting. And they would wait for as long as it takes for them to keep their end of the bargain, to visit our home and to have them retested. Fake news, Ralph? Is Richard, your boy, is he writing fake news? Is he creating panic? Jimmy, is this evidence of how well you have the ball in your hands? Or is this evidence of the extent to which the ball is dropped? They are still waiting. And they would wait for as long as it takes for them to keep their end of the bargain, to visit our home and to have them retested. As Richard Brown writing on his Facebook page. Is this fake news? We can tell you, it only confirms what we are saying about government's irresponsibility in managing this crisis and the extent to which they have dropped the ball. Clearly, either Minister Jimmy Prince did not quite understand what Richard Brown was saying, because from our vantage point, this is evidence of dropping the ball. The very thing that Prince says the government did not do. So we ask whether Ralph and Jimmy would now accuse Assistant Commissioner of Police Richard Brown of engaging in fake news. Will they accuse him of creating panic? Would the ULP's leadership cadre now suggest that Assistant Commissioner of Police Brown's Facebook post is perhaps an aberration and that it would be addressed immediately? But before we accept that, the same Eyewitness News article that spoke of Richard Brown's Facebook post went on to say, one such person who told Eyewitness News that they have no idea how they contracted the virus said that health officials discharged them after they tested positive last week. The patient said that the health officials promised to contact them to get information for contact tracing. However, almost a week later, the health authorities are yet to contact the patient for the information that could inform contact tracing. Yeah? End of quote. So, 1 week passed. We ain't get back to the person yet to find out about contact tracing. And what they tell us is the value of contact tracing again? To know all of the people with whom you have been in contact so that they could have them tested to see what is their status vis-a-vis the virus. So if you let a week pass and you haven't contacted those who were in contact with this person, by the time, if and when you do get to them, how many persons they would each in turn have been in contact with. But we didn't drop the ball, Jimmy. We didn't drop the ball because you say we didn't drop the ball. Yeah? Eyewitness News goes on, quote, the patient told Eyewitness News that on testing positive, they immediately notified the person with whom they had been in contact, and some of them have since been tested. So, if not the health people that facilitated the contact tracing here. It is the individual's own conscience and awareness and desire to be a solid, strong Vincentian concerned about the well-being of his country that did what he thought or she thought was right. Because the authorities ain't get back to him yet. He did his own contact tracing and warned them to go and get tested. If he was waiting on the ministry officials or whoever carried the responsibility for contact tracing, they ain't get to them yet. That is our reality, Jimmy. And that is dropping the ball. So Minister Prince and Prime Minister, Just Another Look remains insistent that your government did not only drop the ball, but at present you don't even know where to find the ball. At present, you do not even know where to find the ball. But it may be more appropriate to end with the Eyewitness News quote of the Prime Minister sometime past, where the Prime Minister was quoted as saying, quote, "There is no need to panic. We ramp up when it is necessary and desirable to ramp up. And we relax the regulation when that is also required. So this is just another stage in the process of dealing with COVID-19. End of quote. That, my dear friends, is his level of responsibility. That is his example of good governance. God help us all. Today, the 30th day of January 2021, marks 5,139 days since the disappearance of J-8 VAX piloted by Dominic Gonzalez with Rashid Ibrahim on board. They disappeared on Sunday, the 19th of November 2006, coming from Canoan to St. Vincent. Today also marks 3,829 days since the disappearance of another SDG aircraft, J-8 SXY, on Thursday, the 5th of August 2010. Piloted by Suresh Lakram, the plane was going from St. Vincent to Canoan to conduct a mercy mission. It never arrived. And we end as always, reminding you that on the 19th of September 2008, Patricia Bowman was crushed to death in her car on her way to work. Ain't nobody seemed to care. It's just another life lost. But her husband has to live with that reality. That the law in this country didn't seem, and the lawyers, oh, no bother. It's just another life. The man should know better. He should come to us, her husband, Alban Bowman. He should know what to do. That's how callous we have become as a Vincentian society. We say we are a Christian society. But that means being our brother's keeper. That means loving your neighbor as you love yourself. Are we? Are we practicing that? Are we practicing that? Enough said. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Kalulu presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard with me on Nice Radio, first aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. Remember, you can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info. We're on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph.